Hi, coming to you again from my office in my attic, low production value studios. I'm trying to do it on my iPhone because the Canvas recording sucks. I really have a hard time using it. I just purchased some software that may help me. It's editing software, let me make caricatures and turn myself into a meme and graphics and such. But it has a steep learning curve, so we may not see any results from that until the end of the semester. I've been hearing that some professors are refusing even to do this simple technology because they feel once we go back to normal, whatever normal means, they won't need to know this kind of technology. But I disagree. I think that what's going to happen come the fall of 21, perhaps even later, perhaps 40 or 50% of delivery of content is going to be online. I don't think we're going to have the same in-person environment that we once had. It's a difficult transition. And speaking of transitions, I want to talk to you about something truly remarkable that happened about 9,000 years ago. After more than 300,000 years of foraging lifestyle, and I'm taking here the broadest estimate for Homo sapiens, after almost 300,000 years of living in small bands and ranging over a bounded environment, perhaps in competition with some other small groups, humans began to settle permanently into villages. They began to build permanent homes, rigid architecture. And instead of gathering wild plants and scavenging and hunting, they began to cultivate wild plants and harvest them systematically. This was a revolutionary change in subsistence. They didn't give up hunting. Hunting continued, but it was no longer the sole source of protein. And the availability of wild plants enabled surpluses to be accrued and stored. New technologies developed, not only in processing of these wild plants, but also in storage, and technologies to help with the production of food and the defense of food and these villages. It was like the first breath you blow into a large balloon. There's a little bit of a ripple, lots of room for expansion, and eventually it does. And to give you an idea how recently this occurred in human history, I'd like for you to imagine you're 20 years old. You're 20 years old. I know some of you are, but the rest of us, let's imagine that we are only 20 years old, and that our 20-year lifespan represents the 300,000 years of the human story. Now imagine you only open your eyes during that lifespan when humans begin to develop agriculture. At this scale, you only opened your eyes last June. That's how recent this is. Scarcely 3% of your existence. Now, the first locations where this transition occurred, where humans began this new relationship with their environment, have been detected archaeologically. And we can point to Southeast Asia, northern Iraq, the Indus River Valley in the area of modern Pakistan, and also in spots along the Yangtze River in China. So we know roughly when and we know roughly where this event occurred in human history, but we don't really know why. There are a number of theories. Several have been proposed, and you'll see them in the PowerPoint lecture that follows this video. All of these theories have merit. All of them have their value. So one does not dominate the other. That's why there are several theories still being debated. And the reality is that they may all have components that fit together. It may not be an either-or situation. Just as remarkable as the transition to agriculture is something that occurred 6,000 years ago, and that's the first proto-cities. And then some 5,500 years ago, the first identifiable true city, Uruk in Iraq. Going back to our earlier analogy, this is as if you open your eyes for the first time with new cities, October, just back in October. It's that soon. Now, these first cities were built from baked mud brick, but they were formidable places with large ritual centers, administrative facilities, neighborhoods, public works, plazas, marketplaces. By no means were they small villages, and they had populations bordering on 20, 30, even 50,000 people. Now, urban life has its advantages, but it also has significant problems. And among these, waste disposal comes to mind, but also the astronomically increased likelihood of disease spread. As humans began to live in dense populations and in close proximity to their animals, diseases jumped from the animals to humans. Over 35 different viruses have been traced to cattle alone, including measles. So there were some issues to cope with. We're still coping with them. In this unit, you will examine some of the first cities, some of the first kingdoms, and look at how social hierarchy developed in this new environment, in these new living arrangements, and how the different kingdoms and the different populations began to compete with one another for scarce resources, and how in some cases they found ways to relate to one another through trade and through mutual assistance. So let's look at the beginnings of agriculture, the beginnings of the first cities, and then we'll be able to advance on to specific civilizations.